The mighty dragon crashed into the desert, his once magnificent scales dulled to a lifeless grey as blood pooled beneath his massive body. One by one, the brave warriors who had tracked him for weeks turned away, their mission complete. They left him to die alone, under the merciless sun, but they never expected the small figure approaching from the distant settlement, a boy carrying nothing but a water jug and compassion where others had only brought weapons. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. I always love chatting with you, and it really helps support the channel. Also, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. The relentless sun beat down on the barren landscape of Proxima Centauri's only habitable planet, New Terra. A small settlement of terraformers and their families clung to existence on the edge of a vast desert that scientists had optimistically named Future Farmland. Little Mason Reed, just 12 years old, stood at the edge of the settlement's protective dome, pressing his palm against the transparent barrier as he watched the distant commotion with wide eyes. "Did you see it, Mason?" Tyler Grant skidded to a halt beside him, breathless with excitement. "The dragon! It fell right out of the sky." Mason nodded silently, his eyes fixed on the horizon where a plume of dust still lingered. The settlement had been buzzing for weeks about the space dragon, not a mythological beast, but one of the massive energy-based life forms that roamed the void between stars. They were incredibly rare and even more dangerous. The adults said this one had been feeding on the energy from the colony's orbital solar array, causing power fluctuations that threatened their survival. "My dad says it's finally dead," Tyler continued, bouncing on his toes. "The defense team tracked it for days and finally got it with the pulse cannons. They're out there now, making sure." Mason pressed his forehead against the dome. Through the distortion, he could make out the convoy of rovers returning to the settlement. The defense team was coming back, which meant they had completed their mission. Something twisted in Mason's stomach. He had never seen a space dragon up close. Few humans had, but he had watched educational holograms about them. They were magnificent creatures that transformed stellar energy into matter, creating their physical forms from pure light and cosmic radiation. Some scientists believed they were sentient. "They're just going to leave it out there?" Mason asked, his voice barely audible. Tyler shrugged. "What else would they do? It's huge, and it was killing our power supply. My dad says good riddance." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the desert floor, Mason returned to his family's living pod. His parents were scientists, his mother a xenobiologist, and his father a terraforming engineer. They were both working late again, trying to solve the colony's persistent agricultural problems. Mason wandered to his mother's desk and activated her research terminal. "Computer, show me information on space dragons," he said. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a magnificent creature soaring through the void, its wingspan stretching hundreds of meters, its body a shimmering tapestry of colors that seemed to contain entire galaxies. "Stellar Draconis," the computer's voice intoned, "a non-carbon-based life form that exists primarily in interstellar space, capable of converting various energy forms into physical matter for protection and interaction with physical environments." Mason leaned closer. "Are they intelligent?" "Current research is inconclusive," the computer replied. "However, specimens have demonstrated problem-solving abilities and possibly rudimentary communication attempts with other species." Do they need water?" Mason asked, a plan forming in his mind. "Stellar Draconis does not require water as carbon-based life forms do. However, when manifesting in planetary atmospheres, they have been observed absorbing various elements to maintain their physical form, including hydrogen and oxygen." Mason's eyes widened. The dragon was dying out there, alone in the desert. Maybe it needed water not to drink, but to help maintain its physical form in New Terra's atmosphere. Maybe it wasn't dead yet. Maybe... His decision made, Mason waited until the settlement quieted for the night. When the lights dimmed to simulate Earth's night cycle, he slipped from his family's pod and made his way to the agricultural sector. There, he filled a large canister with water and strapped it to a hover dolly. Getting through the dome's pedestrian airlock was risky. It would record his exit. But Mason knew the security team would be celebrating their victory tonight, not monitoring the airlocks. The desert night was cold, a stark contrast to the scorching day. Mason pulled his jacket tighter around his shoulders and followed the tracks left by the defense team's rovers. The dragon had fallen about 3 kilometers from the settlement, far enough that the adults thought it posed no further threat, close enough that Mason could reach it on foot. The first thing Mason noticed was the smell, like ozone after a lightning strike, mixed with something alien and indescribable. Then he saw it, and his breath caught in his throat. In the moonlight, the dragon was both terrifying and beautiful. It was smaller than the educational holograms had depicted, perhaps 60 meters from nose to tail, but still massive compared to any Earth creature. Its body resembled that of ancient Earth dragons from myth, but its skin was like looking at the night sky. Deep blue-black with points of light that seemed to move and swirl like stars. One of its wings was clearly damaged, a great tear running through the membrane that looked like a rip in the fabric of space itself. Its breathing was labored, each exhale releasing small sparks of energy that dissipated into the air. It was dying, just as Tyler had said. But it wasn't dead yet. Mason approached cautiously, pulling the water canister behind him. The dragon's enormous head rested on the ground, its eyes closed, but as Mason drew nearer, those eyes opened, revealing orbs that contained what looked like swirling nebulae. "I brought you water," Mason said softly, trying to keep his voice from trembling. "I don't know if it will help, but I thought you might need it." The dragon made no response, but its gaze remained fixed on Mason. The boy moved closer, his heart pounding in his chest. When he was just a few meters away, he stopped and activated the hover dolly's release valve. Water began to flow onto the desert floor beside the dragon's head. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, the moisture began to rise from the ground, not as vapor, but as if the water itself was being drawn upward against gravity. It moved toward the dragon's wounded wing and began to spread across the tear, forming a thin, shimmering film. "It's working," Mason whispered, amazed. The dragon's eyes seemed to focus more sharply on him. Mason felt a strange sensation in his mind, not quite a voice, but an impression of one. A feeling of gratitude? "You're welcome," Mason said, uncertain if he was imagining the communication. "I couldn't just leave you out here alone." He sat down on the ground, cross-legged, a respectful distance from the dragon's head. "I'm Mason. I live in that settlement over there." He pointed toward the distant dome, just visible in the moonlight. "I'm sorry they hurt you. They were afraid because you were affecting our power systems. We need that power to survive here." The dragon blinked slowly, and Mason felt another impression in his mind, curiosity, perhaps. Encouraged, he continued to talk, explaining about the colony, about Earth, about his parents' work to make this planet habitable. He wasn't sure if the dragon understood him, but it seemed to be listening, its labored breathing gradually becoming more regular. As the night wore on, Mason began to shiver in the desert cold. The water canister was nearly empty, and he knew he should return to the settlement before dawn, before his absence was discovered. But he couldn't bring himself to leave the dragon alone. "I'll come back tomorrow," he promised, standing up and stretching his stiff limbs. "I'll bring more water." As he turned to go, he felt a powerful surge of emotion from the dragon: fear, loneliness, pain. Without thinking, Mason reached out and placed his small hand against the dragon's side. The skin felt neither hot nor cold, but seemed to vibrate with energy, like touching a tuning fork. "I won't leave you," Mason said, making a new decision. "I'll stay until morning." He sat back down and leaned carefully against the dragon's side. To his surprise, the area around him began to warm, as if the creature was deliberately generating heat to keep him comfortable. Mason smiled and closed his eyes, just for a moment. He awoke to the sound of approaching rovers. The sun was just cresting the horizon, painting the desert in shades of gold and amber. Mason scrambled to his feet, his heart racing. He had stayed all night, and now the settlement had noticed his absence. The dragon's eyes were open, watching him with those strange, galaxy-filled orbs. "I'm sorry," Mason said hurriedly. "They're coming for me, not to hurt you again, but they might. I don't know what they'll do." The dragon's gaze shifted to the approaching vehicles, then back to Mason. This time, the impression in his mind was clearer, almost like words. No fear. 3 rovers approached, raising dust clouds in their wake. They stopped 100 meters away, and Mason recognized his parents in the lead vehicle. They jumped out and ran toward him, their faces masks of worry and relief. "Mason!" His mother, Dr. Lauren Bennett, cried as she reached him. She grabbed him by the shoulders, her eyes wild with fear. "What were you thinking? Do you have any idea how dangerous—" She stopped abruptly, her gaze moving past Mason to the massive creature behind him. Her scientific training took over, and her expression transformed from panic to wonder. "It's still alive," she breathed. Mason's father, Caleb Walker, approached more cautiously, his hand near the sidearm, all settlers carried outside the dome. "Mason, step away from it. Slowly." "No, Dad," Mason said firmly, standing his ground. "It's hurt, not dangerous. It needs our help." "Son, that thing has been draining our orbital arrays for weeks," his father argued. "It nearly caused a complete power failure." "It didn't know," Mason insisted. "It was just eating, like we do. It's intelligent, Dad. It can communicate." He turned to his mother, appealing to the scientist in her. "Mom, you study alien life. This is the most amazing creature we've ever encountered. We can't just let it die." "Doctor." Bennett was already scanning the dragon with her portable equipment, her professional curiosity overcoming her maternal fear. "These readings are extraordinary," she murmured. "The cellular structure, if you can even call it that. It's like nothing I've ever seen. It's not just absorbing the water, it's incorporating it somehow, using the hydrogen and oxygen atoms to repair its structure." Mason stepped closer to the dragon's head, placing his hand on its shimmering skin. "It was trying to communicate with me, in my mind." His mother looked at him sharply. "Telepathy. That would be revolutionary," finished Dr. Adam Clark, the colony's chief scientist, who had emerged from the second rover. "If you're right, this could change everything we know about interspecies communication." The dragon's eyes fixed on Mason again, and this time the impression in his mind was stronger. Danger, pain, help. "It's still hurting," Mason said urgently. "The water helped, but it needs more than that. It needs energy." He looked at his father. "Dad, you know more about energy systems than anyone. There has to be a way to help it without risking the colony's power." Caleb Walker ran a hand through his hair, clearly torn between caution and the possibilities before them. "The auxiliary solar array," he said finally. "It's not connected to the main grid yet. We could reconfigure it to release energy in a form this creature might be able to absorb." "It would take hours to set up," Dr. Clark objected. "Then we'd better get started," Mason's father replied, making his decision. As the adults began a rapid-fire technical discussion, Mason stayed by the dragon's side, his hand resting on its shimmering skin. "They're going to help you," he told it softly. "Just hold on a little longer." The dragon's massive eye blinked slowly, and Mason felt a wave of something that might have been hope. The next hours passed in a flurry of activity. More rovers arrived from the settlement, bringing equipment and personnel. Dr. Bennett coordinated a team of xenobiologists, taking samples and readings from the dragon with utmost care. Mason's father worked with the engineering team to modify the auxiliary solar array, repositioning it to direct concentrated energy toward the wounded creature. Throughout it all, Mason refused to leave the dragon's side. He brought more water, watching in fascination as the liquid was drawn into the creature's body. He talked to it constantly, explaining what the humans were doing, promising that help was coming. Sometimes he felt impressions in return, curiosity, gratitude, and increasingly something like affection. "I think it likes you," his mother said, joining him after completing another scan. Her initial fear had given way to professional excitement. The neural activity increases whenever you're speaking to it. "I like it too," Mason said simply. "Do you think it will get better?" Dr. Bennett's expression grew serious. "I don't know, sweetheart. Its energy levels are dangerously low, and the damage to its physical form is extensive. But it's clearly fighting to survive." She smiled at her son. "Thanks to you, it has a chance." By midday, the makeshift energy transfer system was ready. Mason stood back as his father activated the array. A beam of concentrated solar energy, modified to match the frequency patterns Dr. Bennett had detected in the dragon's body, shot toward the wounded creature. The effect was immediate and spectacular. The dragon's body seemed to illuminate from within, the star-like points of light in its skin glowing brighter. The torn wing began to shimmer, the edges of the wound slowly drawing together. A sound like distant thunder rolled across the desert as the dragon raised its head for the first time since its fall. "It's working!" Mason shouted, jumping with excitement. The dragon's eyes, now blazing within a light, found Mason. The impression that touched his mind was clearer than ever before. Gratitude, friendship, name. Mason blinked in surprise. "You want to know my name?" he asked aloud, causing the researchers nearby to look at him curiously. "I'm Mason. Mason Reed." The dragon seemed to contemplate this, and then Mason felt a new impression. A complex sensation that he somehow understood was the dragon's own name, untranslatable into human language, but something like starlight across void. "I'll call you Star," Mason decided, smiling. The dragon, Star, made that rumbling sound again, but this time Mason realized it wasn't a sound of pain. It was more like a purr. The thought made him laugh out loud. Dr. Clark approached, his face alight with wonder. "The readings we're getting are off the charts," he told Mason's parents. "This creature is literally converting solar radiation into matter to heal itself. If we could understand that process, we could revolutionize energy production," Mason's father finished. "Not to mention materials, science, physics, and it's intelligent," Dr. Bennett added, "demonstrably sapient. Mason seems to have established some kind of psychic link with it." The three scientists looked at Mason with new respect, and the boy felt himself blush. He hadn't done anything special, really. He had just shown kindness where others had shown fear and aggression. As the day progressed, Star continued to recover, the energy infusion restoring its strength. Its skin began to shift from the dull grey-black it had been when Mason first found it to a richer, deeper blue, with the points of light growing brighter and more numerous. The tear in its wing was slowly mending, the edges drawing together as if being stitched by invisible hands. By late afternoon, a crowd had gathered at a safe distance. Nearly half the settlement had come to see the miracle taking place in the desert. Children pointed and gasped as Star's colors continued to intensify, rippling in waves across its massive body. Adults whispered among themselves, some fearful, others awestruck. Governor Emily Parker herself arrived, stepping out of her official rover with a concerned expression. "Dr. Walker, Dr. Bennett," she greeted Mason's parents tersely. Would you care to explain why you've redirected colony resources to aid the very creature that nearly caused our power grid to collapse? Before either scientist could respond, Mason stepped forward. Despite being just a boy facing the most powerful person in the colony, he stood tall. Governor Parker, this dragon, we call him Star, didn't mean to hurt us. He was just trying to survive like we all are, and now he's trying to communicate with us. The governor looked skeptical. Communication with a space dragon. It's true, Dr. Bennett confirmed, placing a supportive hand on her son's shoulder. We're detecting clear patterns of neural activity consistent with intelligent thought, and Mason appears to have established a rudimentary telepathic connection. A child, telepathically communicating with an alien dragon. Governor Parker's tone was flat with disbelief. As if in response to the doubt, Star suddenly moved, causing many in the crowd to gasp or step back in fear. The dragon raised its massive head higher, its nebula eyes fixed on the governor. Then, to everyone's astonishment, it began to glow brighter, the lights within its skin coalescing into distinct patterns. Stars, constellations, a map of the local star systems projected from within Star's own body. It's showing us its territory, Dr. Clark breathed, or its migration route. The pattern shifted, showing New Terra's sun and its planets, with a bright point indicating their current location. Then the image zoomed out, revealing more star systems, some with planets circled in light. Other colonies? Mason's father suggested. Other human settlements? The map expanded further, revealing a vast network of points and lines connecting them. Some of the points pulsed with light, others remained dim. It's a navigation chart, Mason said suddenly, the knowledge appearing in his mind as if placed there. The bright points are energy sources, stars where Star and others like him feed safely. The dim ones are dangerous for some reason. He looked up at the governor. Star didn't know our solar collectors were artificial. In space, they look just like the natural energy formations his kind usually feed on. Governor Parker stared at the display, her political concerns visibly warring with the wonder of the moment. You're saying it made an honest mistake, and now it's apologizing, offering information? Yes, Mason said confidently, and I think there's more. Star wants to help us. The dragon's eyes seemed to intensify their glow, and the map zoomed in on New Terra again. New patterns formed, showing energy flows and radiation patterns invisible to the human eye. Star was revealing how stellar energy interacted with their planet's atmosphere, showing them something they had never seen before. That's it, Mason's father exclaimed. That's why our terraforming efforts keep failing in the Northern Hemisphere. We've been missing these radiation patterns entirely. Dr. Bennett was already recording the display with her equipment. This could save us years of research, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Years of trial and error. Governor Parker's resistance crumbled in the face of this gift. This is extraordinary. Truly extraordinary. She looked at Mason with new respect. It seems we owe both you and your friend an apology, young man. As the sun began to set once more, Star's energy levels had stabilized, and the tear in its wing was nearly healed. The colony's scientists worked tirelessly, recording everything they could about the dragon's biology and the information it shared. Plans were already being made to redesign the orbital solar arrays so they wouldn't attract or harm other space dragons that might pass through the system. Mason sat close to Star's head, leaning against its now warm skin. "You're going to be okay," he told the dragon, "and when you're strong enough, you can go back to space where you belong." The impression he received in return was complex. Gratitude, friendship, return, promise. "You'll come back to visit?" Mason asked, hope rising in his chest. Star's answer was a clear affirmative, accompanied by an image of itself soaring through space, then returning to New Terra, to Mason. "I'd like that," the boy said, smiling. "I'd like that very much." As darkness fell over the desert, the lights within Star's body glowed brighter, as if compensating for the setting sun. The dragon and the boy remained side by side, an unlikely friendship formed in the most unexpected circumstances, a friendship that would change not only their lives but the future of human-alien relations throughout the galaxy. And it had all begun with a simple act of kindness, a boy bringing water to a dying dragon, refusing to abandon it when everyone else had walked away. In the vast reaches of space, among the countless species and civilizations, it was perhaps humanity's capacity for compassion that truly made them unique. Not their technology or their intelligence, but their ability to see past differences and fear, to connect with something utterly alien and recognize the shared desire for life and understanding that transcends the boundaries of biology and origin. As Mason drifted to sleep beside his new friend, the desert night was illuminated by the gentle glow of Star's recovering body, a beacon of hope and possibility shining in the darkness. Mason woke to find himself back in his own bed, the events of the previous day seeming almost like a dream. But the buzz of activity outside the family's living pod confirmed it had all been real. Through the window, he could see people hurrying back and forth, carrying equipment and talking excitedly. In the distance, beyond the dome, a shimmering blue form was visible against the desert landscape. Star had survived the night. Mason jumped out of bed and rushed to get dressed. His mother appeared in the doorway, her expression a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. "Good morning, sweetheart," she said. "How are you feeling?" "I need to go see Star," Mason replied, pulling on his boots. "Is he okay?" Dr. Bennett smiled. "Better than okay. The dragon's recovery has accelerated beyond all our predictions. Your father brought you home last night after you fell asleep, but he went back out at dawn." She knelt to look Mason in the eye. "What you did was incredibly brave, Mason, and incredibly important. The governor has declared today a colony holiday so everyone can witness this historic moment." "What moment?" Mason asked, confused. "Star is preparing to return to space," his mother explained. "But he's been waiting for you, we think. The neural activity patterns suggest he won't leave without saying goodbye." Mason's heart gave a strange lurch. Joy that Star was recovered enough to leave, sadness that his new friend would be gone so soon. "Then we have to hurry," he said, grabbing his jacket. Outside, the entire settlement seemed to be in motion. A steady stream of people was filing through the dome's main airlock, heading toward temporary structures that had been erected overnight around Star. Research stations, observation platforms, and even food vendors created an impromptu festival atmosphere. Mason spotted several of his classmates among the crowd, including Tyler, who waved excitedly. "Mason, over here!" Tyler called, pushing through the crowd. "Is it true you can talk to it with your mind? Everyone's saying you're connected to it somehow." "Sort of," Mason admitted, feeling self-conscious about the attention. "Not exactly talking, more like feelings and images. But it's getting clearer." "That's the coolest thing ever," Tyler declared, his previous fear of the dragon apparently forgotten. "Can you ask it if there are more like it out there? A whole dragon civilization in space?" Mason promised to try as he and his mother made their way through the airlock and onto the desert floor. The morning air was already warming, promising another scorching day. But Mason barely noticed the heat as they approached the area where Star rested. The transformation was astonishing. The dragon's body, which had been dull and lifeless just yesterday morning, now rippled with vibrant colors. Deep blues and purples predominated, but streaks of gold and silver ran like rivers across its massive form. The points of light within its skin had multiplied and brightened, giving the impression that Star was somehow larger on the inside than the outside, as if its body contained vast cosmic spaces. The damaged wing was completely healed, the tear sealed without even a scar. As Mason approached, Star's enormous head lifted, those nebula eyes focusing on him with unmistakable recognition. Mason, friend, joy. The impression was so clear that Mason laughed out loud. "Good morning to you too, Star," he said, reaching out to touch the dragon's shimmering skin. "You look amazing." Around them, scientists and engineers worked at various stations, recording data and running tests. Mason recognized Dr. Clark directing a team that was using specialized equipment to scan Star's body structure. His father was working with another group that appeared to be studying the energy patterns Star had revealed the previous day. "Mason!" his father called, waving him over. "Come see this! Star's been showing us something incredible." Mason hurried to his father's side, where a holographic display showed complex energy patterns flowing across a model of New Terra. "What is it?" "Star's been mapping the planet's energy flows for us," Caleb explained, his eyes alight with excitement. "Radiation patterns, magnetic field interactions, atmospheric energy conversion, things we've been trying to understand for years. This data will revolutionize our terraforming efforts." "Star understands what we're trying to do here?" Mason asked, impressed. "More than understands," his father replied. "I think Star wants to help. After what happened, after we hurt him, he still wants to help us." Mason felt a swell of pride in his new friend. "Of course he does. Star isn't angry about what happened. He understands it was a misunderstanding." A commotion near the main research station drew their attention. Governor Parker had arrived with her staff and was speaking urgently with Dr. Clark. Mason couldn't hear what they were saying, but the governor's expression was serious. "What's going on?" Mason asked his father. Caleb frowned. "I'm not sure." "Let's find out." They approached the group just as Dr. Clark was pulling up a holographic display of local space. A red dot was blinking near the edge of the solar system. "The orbital observatory detected it an hour ago," the governor was saying. "It's on a direct course for New Terra, moving at incredible speed." "Another dragon?" someone suggested. "No," Dr. Clark replied grimly. "The signature is different. This is a ship, a very large ship of unknown design." Mason felt a sudden pressure in his mind. Star was trying to communicate something urgently. He hurried to the dragon's side, placing both hands on its shimmering skin to strengthen their connection. "Star? What is it? Do you know what's coming?" The impression that flooded Mason's mind was intense and complex. "Danger, hunters, run." "Hunters?" Mason repeated aloud. "Someone is hunting you?" Star's response came as a series of rapid images, massive ships pursuing dragons through space, capturing them, containing them in energy fields, harvesting something from their bodies. The impressions carried emotions of fear, pain, and loss. "Mom! Dad!" Mason called, his voice cracking with urgency. "Star says the ship is dangerous. They hunt dragons." Dr. Bennett rushed to his side, her equipment already scanning Star's neural patterns. "The activity is spiking." "He's definitely agitated about something." Mason relayed what Star had shown him, the hunters, their ships, their methods. "They've been following Star," he concluded. "That's why he came into our system in the first place. He was running from them." Governor Parker's face hardened. "So this creature led dangerous aliens right to our colony, after everything we've done to help it?" "No," Mason protested. "Star thought he'd lost them. He would never deliberately put us in danger." Star's eyes fixed on the governor, and the air around them seemed to vibrate with intensity. The lights within the dragon's body coalesced again, forming a new display, a detailed image of the approaching ship. It was enormous and predatory in design, with forward sections that resembled massive jaws or claws. "It's giving us tactical information," Governor Parker realized, her anger giving way to pragmatism. "Dr. Clark, record everything." The image shifted, showing the ship's weapon systems, its likely capabilities, its weak points. Then it changed again, showing a sequence that was harder to interpret. Star in space, confronting the ship, drawing it away from New Terra. "No," Mason said, understanding Star's plan. "You can't fight them alone. They'll capture you. Protect, friends, responsibility." The emotions behind these concepts were powerful. Determination, courage, and something deeper. Star felt responsible for bringing danger to the colony and was prepared to sacrifice himself to protect them. "There has to be another way," Mason insisted, tears forming in his eyes. "We can help you fight them." His father placed a hand on his shoulder. "Mason, our defense systems are designed for meteorite deflection and small-scale threats. We have nothing that could challenge a ship of that size." "Then we have to evacuate," Mason said desperately. "Get everyone into the emergency shelters." "There's no time," Governor Parker said, checking her tablet. "The ship will reach our orbit in less than 3 hours. Even if we could get everyone to the shelters, there's no guarantee they would protect us from whatever weapons that ship carries." Star's head rose higher, its entire body beginning to glow with increasing intensity. The message was clear. The dragon had made its decision. "At least let me come with you," Mason pleaded, pressing his forehead against Star's shimmering skin. "Danger, no, stay, return." Star was refusing to put Mason in danger, but was promising to return if possible. The boy felt tears running down his cheeks, unable to bear the thought of his friend facing the hunters alone. "There might be another option," Dr. Bennett said suddenly. "The colony's electromagnetic shield. It was designed to protect us from solar radiation during flares, but if we reconfigured it, we could extend it to cover Star," Mason's father finished, catching on to his wife's idea. "Create a field that mimics the dragon's natural energy signature but amplified, like a cloaking device. It would drain our reserves completely," Dr. Clark warned. "We'd be without power for days afterward." Governor Parker looked from the scientists to Star, then to the red dot on the holographic display, steadily moving closer to their world. "How quickly can you make these modifications?" 2 hours, maybe less with enough help," Caleb replied. "Do it," the governor ordered. "Everyone with engineering or technical skills, report to the Shield Control Center immediately." She turned to address the gathered colonists. "The rest of you, return to the dome and prepare for emergency protocols." "This is not a drill." As the crowd dispersed, following the governor's orders, Mason remained by Star's side. "They're going to help you hide," he explained. "The hunters won't be able to find you." Star's response was skeptical. Hunters, persistent, find. "But it might buy us time," Mason argued. "Time to figure out a better plan." The dragon seemed to consider this, then projected a new image, itself high in New Terra's atmosphere, surrounded by the electromagnetic shield, confronting the hunter's ship from a position of strength rather than weakness. "You want to use our shield as a weapon?" Mason asked, understanding dawning. "Protect together. Victory." Mason relayed this plan to the adults, who reacted with varying degrees of surprise and consideration. "It's actually brilliant," his father admitted after thinking it through. "If we can extend the shield around Star, he could approach the ship without being detected as a dragon. Then, when he's close enough, he could release a massive energy burst, using the shield as an amplifier," Dr. Clark continued, growing excited. "Theoretically, it could disable their systems temporarily, giving us time to make contact and negotiate," Governor Parker concluded. "Or at least warn them away from our colony." The plan was risky, depending on technology that had never been tested in such a way, and the abilities of a creature they barely understood. But as the red dot on the holographic display drew inexorably closer, it became clear it was their best option. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of frantic activity. While the technical teams worked to reconfigure the colony's shield, Dr. Bennett and her xenobiology team worked with Star, helping the dragon understand exactly how the modified shield would function and what they needed him to do. Mason stayed by Star's side throughout, serving as the primary conduit for communication. As the deadline approached, the modifications were complete. The colony's massive shield projectors had been repositioned around Star, ready to create a field that would both disguise and amplify the dragon's natural energy signature. "It's time," Governor Parker announced, checking her tablet one last time. "The ship will enter orbit in 20 minutes. The moment of farewell had come too soon. Mason stood before his friend, trying to be brave even as tears threatened again. "You have to come back," he said firmly. "Promise me." Star's enormous head lowered until it was level with the boy. Those nebula eyes seemed to contain entire universes as they gazed at Mason with what could only be described as affection. "Promise, return, friend, always." Mason wrapped his arms as far around Star's snout as they would go, hugging the dragon fiercely. "I'll be waiting for you." With a final gentle nudge of his massive head, Star moved away from Mason and positioned himself in the center of the shield projectors. The dragon's body began to glow with increasing intensity, building up energy for what was to come. "Activate the shield," Governor Parker commanded. "Doctor." Clark and Caleb Walker worked in tandem, initiating the sequence. The air around Star shimmered as the electromagnetic field sprang into existence, enveloping the dragon in a bubble of energy that pulsed with power. Inside the shield, Star's form seemed to blur and shift, his distinctive dragon shape becoming less defined, transforming into what looked more like a small star or energy anomaly. "It's working," Dr. Clark breathed. "The shield is masking his biological signature and amplifying his energy output." Star looked at Mason one last time, those nebula eyes somehow visible even through the distortion of the shield. Then, with a sound like thunder, the dragon launched himself upward. The shield moved with him, maintaining its integrity as Star ascended rapidly into the sky, becoming a bright point of light that quickly disappeared into the blue. "Let's get back to the dome," Governor Parker ordered. "We need to monitor the situation from the control center." The return to the settlement was tense and silent. Mason walked between his parents, his eyes fixed on the sky where his friend had vanished. Inside the dome, they went directly to the colony's control center, where a large holographic display showed orbital space around New Terra. 2 points of light were visible, the red dot of the approaching ship and a new blue dot that was Star. "The ship has entered orbit," announced the technician monitoring the display. "Current position places it on the far side of the planet from the colony." "And Star?" Mason asked anxiously. "Maintaining position in the upper atmosphere directly above us," the technician replied. "The shield is holding stable." They watched as the red dot moved along its orbital path, steadily approaching the point where it would be directly overhead. Star's blue dot began to move as well, ascending higher on a trajectory to intercept the ship. "They're going to see him," Governor Parker said tensely. "Not until he wants them to," Mason's father replied. "The shield is masking his signature completely. To their sensors, he'll look like a small energy disturbance, nothing more." The 2 dots drew closer together. Everyone in the control center held their breath, watching the silent drama playing out thousands of kilometers above them. When the dots were nearly touching, Star's signal suddenly flared brilliantly on the display. "He's dropped the disguise," Dr. Clark said. "He's letting them see him." The ship's trajectory altered immediately, moving to pursue the dragon. But Star was already accelerating away from the planet, leading the hunters away from the colony. "It's working," Mason whispered. "They're following him." For several tense minutes, they watched as the chase continued, moving steadily away from New Terra. Then just as the 2 dots reached the edge of their sensor range, Star's signal flared again, far more intensely than before. "Energy surge detected," The technician called out. Massive release, consistent with the shield being used as an amplifier. The ship's signal flickered, then stabilized, but its movement had stopped. Star's signal continued to move away, disappearing from their sensor range. Did it work? Governor Parker demanded. What's happening? The ship appears to be disabled, at least temporarily, the technician reported. No sign of pursuit. Star has successfully led them away from New Terra and escaped. A cheer erupted in the control center. Mason felt a wave of relief wash over him, though it was tempered by sadness. Star had escaped, but now he was gone, flying deep into space, perhaps never to return. He'll come back, his mother said softly, seeing his expression. He promised, didn't he? Mason nodded, trying to hold on to hope. He promised. In the days that followed, New Terra slowly returned to normal. As predicted, the power drain from the shield modification left the colony running on emergency systems for nearly a week, but no one complained, not when they understood what had been averted. The defense team scanned constantly for any sign of the hunter's ship returning, but it never reappeared in their system. Mason spent much of his time at the edge of the dome, looking up at the stars, wondering where Star was and if he was safe. His parents and the other scientists were busy analyzing the wealth of data Star had provided, already implementing changes to the terraforming process based on the Dragon's insights. 2 weeks after Star's departure, Mason was sitting alone in his favorite spot at the dome's edge when his mother found him. I thought you might like to see this, she said, sitting beside him and handing him her tablet. The atmospheric sensors picked it up this morning. On the screen was a pattern of energy fluctuations in the upper atmosphere, subtle, but with a distinctive signature that Mason recognized immediately. Star? He asked, his heart leaping. Dr. Bennett smiled. Not physically present. No. But this pattern, it's almost like a message transmitted across space. The frequency matches Star's neural patterns exactly. Mason studied the data, and suddenly he could feel it, that familiar presence in his mind, distant but unmistakable. The impression was simple but powerful. Friend, safe, remember, return. He's okay, Mason said, smiling through sudden tears. He got away from the hunters, and he's telling us he'll keep his promise. His mother put her arm around his shoulders. Your father thinks we might be able to respond. Create a signal that Star would recognize to let him know we received his message. Can we do it now? Mason asked eagerly. That evening, the colony's communication array was temporarily reconfigured to transmit a special signal into space, a pattern based on Mason's own neural activity when he thought about Star, amplified and directed toward the coordinates where the energy fluctuations had originated. As the signal was sent, Mason stood with his parents and watched the stars come out above the desert. Somewhere out there, his friend was flying free, perhaps with others of his kind, and someday he would return to the small human colony that had helped him when he needed it most. 3 months later, the terraforming project experienced an unexpected breakthrough. The modifications suggested by Star's data had accelerated the process beyond all predictions. The desert where Star had fallen began to show signs of life, first small patches of engineered lichen, then hardy grasses designed to stabilize the soil. By the 6-month mark, the area around the colony was visibly transforming, the barrier between future farmland and reality narrowing with each passing day. Mason, now appointed as an official junior assistant to the xenobiology team, a position created specifically for him, was helping to monitor the changes when the alert came. Something was entering the atmosphere, something large, moving at incredible speed, but with controlled descent. The colony's defenses went on automatic alert, but Mason knew immediately what it was. The familiar pressure in his mind, absent for so long, had returned. Star, return, joy, promise. "He's back!" Mason shouted, running toward the dome's main airlock. Stars coming back! By the time he reached the airlock, half the colony was already gathering, alerted by the sensors. Governor Parker was there, along with Mason's parents and Dr. Clark, all watching the sky with expressions ranging from caution to excitement. "Are we sure it's him?" the governor asked. "It's him," Mason said confidently. "I can feel him." A brilliant point of light appeared in the evening sky, descending rapidly toward the desert floor. As it drew closer, they could make out the distinctive shape, the long, sinuous body, the massive wings, the shimmering skin that contained galaxies. But Star was not alone. "There are two of them," Dr. Clark said in awe. "No, three!" As Star approached, they could see that he was accompanied by two other dragons, one slightly larger with scales that shimmered with golden and amber hues, the other smaller with a silvery white coloration. The three dragons circled the colony once, then landed gracefully on the desert floor, a safe distance from the dome. Mason couldn't wait any longer. Ignoring the calls of caution, he ran through the airlock and across the sand toward his friend. Star lowered his massive head as the boy approached, those nebula eyes glowing with unmistakable recognition and joy. "You came back," Mason said, placing his hands on Star's shimmering skin. "You really came back." The impression he received was warm and clear. Promise, keep, friend, always. Then, to Mason's surprise, he felt something new. A tentative touch on his mind from one of the other dragons. The golden one had moved closer, regarding Mason with curious eyes that contained swirling golden nebulae rather than blue ones. "Hello," Mason said, turning to the newcomer. "I'm Mason." The impression he received was different from Star's, more formal somehow, but no less friendly. Greeting, respect, gratitude. Star projected an explanation. "Elder, teacher, leader. You're a leader among your kind," Mason asked the golden dragon, who dipped its head in what seemed like confirmation. By now, a delegation from the colony had approached cautiously, led by Governor Parker and Mason's parents. Star acknowledged them with a gentle rumble, then turned his attention back to the desert floor. To everyone's amazement, he began to glow intensely, directing energy downward. Where the energy touched the sand, immediate transformation occurred. The engineered plants accelerated in their growth, spreading outward in a visible wave of green. The golden dragon and the silvery one joined in, their combined energies creating a ripple effect of transformation across the desert. Within minutes, an area of several square kilometers had been transformed from barren sand to fertile soil covered with the engineered plants the terraformers had been struggling to establish for months. "They're helping us terraform," Dr. Bennett said in awe. "They're accelerating the process exponentially." Star projected an image to Mason, the dragons returning regularly, helping to transform more and more of the planet, working in partnership with the human settlers. It was an offer of alliance, of friendship between species. "Governor," Mason said, turning to Emily Parker with excitement, "Star and his people want to help us. They can make the terraforming work much faster than we could alone. And in return," the golden dragon projected a clear request. "Safe feed space." "They want safe places to feed," Mason translated. "Designated areas where they can absorb energy without affecting our systems. And protection from the hunters." Governor Parker looked from the dragons to the miraculous transformation of the desert, then to the hopeful faces of her science team. Her decision wasn't difficult. "Tell them we accept," she said formally. "New Terra welcomes the friendship of the dragons." In the years that followed, the partnership flourished. The colony established special energy collection stations in orbit that were designed specifically for dragon feeding, places where the creatures could safely absorb the energy they needed without disrupting human systems. In return, The dragons regularly visited the planet, using their unique abilities to accelerate the terraforming process. The hunters never returned to New Terra's system. Star explained through Mason that they had spread word among their kind about this safe haven, warning all dragons to avoid the hunters' territories and established shipping lanes where misunderstandings might occur. 10 years after the day Mason had brought water to a dying dragon, New Terra was barely recognizable. What had once been a struggling colony on the edge of a vast desert was now a thriving settlement surrounded by forests and fields. The terraforming process, supercharged by dragon assistance, had transformed nearly half the planet's surface. Mason, now 22 years old, had become the colony's chief xenobiologist and official liaison to the dragons. His childhood connection with Star had evolved into a sophisticated communication system that allowed for complex information exchange between humans and dragons. Together, they had developed technologies that benefited both species and established protocols for peaceful interaction. On the anniversary of their first meeting, Mason stood on a hilltop overlooking the lush valley that had once been barren desert. Star descended from the sky to join him, his massive form casting a shadow over the landscape below. "Hard to believe it all started with a jug of water," Mason said, placing his hand on his friend's shimmering skin. Star's response carried the wisdom and affection of their years of friendship. Kindness, power, change, universe. Mason smiled, understanding perfectly. Sometimes the smallest act of compassion could change everything, could forge connections between the stars themselves, bringing together species that should never have met, creating harmony where there might have been only fear and conflict. As the sun set over New Terra, human and dragon watched together, their friendship a testament to the unexpected ways the universe could unfold when someone chose kindness over indifference, when someone refused to abandon a creature in need, even one as alien as a dying dragon from the stars. And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments, whether positive or negative. Your feedback helps us improve. Also, leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug and see you in the next story.